Number 1. The Reign of Terror. The Reign of Terror began in June 1793 during the French Revolution when radical Jacobins seized control of the revolutionary government. Maximilien Robespierre and the Committee of Public Safety declared that terror was necessary to protect the revolution from its enemies. Anyone suspected of counter-revolutionary sympathies faced arrest, trial, and execution within days. The guillotine became the symbol of this era as it fell daily in Paris and provincial cities across France. Revolutionary tribunals dispensed swift justice without proper legal protections. Aristocrats, priests, merchants, and even former revolutionaries were executed for alleged crimes against the Republic. Marie Antoinette was guillotined in October 1793, followed by thousands of others from all social classes. But the bloodshed was only beginning. The violence reached its peak during the Great Terror in June and July 1794, when Paris witnessed over 1,500 executions in just 6 weeks. In the Vendée region, revolutionary forces killed an estimated 170,000 people, including women and children. The terror consumed its own creators when Robespierre was arrested and executed in July 1794. Between 16,000 and 40,000 people were executed during the Reign of Terror, with an additional 200,000 to 300,000 dying in prison from disease. If you're shocked by these numbers, hit that like button and let me know in the comments which brutal period shocked you most. Number 2. The 30 Years' War. The 30 Years' War began in 1618 when Protestant nobles in Bohemia rebelled against the Catholic Habsburg monarchy and transformed into one of Europe's most destructive conflicts. The Holy Roman Empire, Spain, France, Sweden, and numerous German states fought across Central Europe for 3 decades. What started as a localized religious rebellion became a power struggle that devastated an entire continent. The war ravaged German states through repeated campaigns that destroyed cities, farmland, and entire regions. Armies lived off the land, seizing crops and livestock while leaving populations to starve. Mercenary forces showed no mercy to civilians. The sack of Magdeburg in 1630 saw 20,000 civilians slaughtered in a single day of violence. Disease and famine killed far more people than actual combat as social structures collapsed completely. The German population declined from 21 million to perhaps 13 million by the war's end. Some regions lost up to 60% of their entire population. Villages were burned and fields left untilled for years. The Peace of Westphalia in 1648 ended the conflict. Approximately 8 million people died during the war, making it one of the deadliest conflicts in European history. Economic recovery took generations as the devastation had been so complete. Subscribe if you want to dive deeper into history's darkest chapters. Number 3. Russian serfdom. Russian serfdom developed gradually from the 15th century, but became fully established during the 17th century under the Romanov dynasty. The 1649 law code formally bound peasants to the land and their noble landlords permanently, creating a system barely distinguishable from slavery. Serfs comprised roughly 80% of Russia's population, living in grinding poverty, while their labor sustained the Russian state and aristocracy. Serfs had virtually no legal rights and existed entirely at their landlord's mercy. They could be bought, sold, traded, or given away separately from land, treated like property rather than human beings. Physical punishment, including brutal beatings, was legal and routine. Many landlords maintained private prisons where serfs could be confined, tortured, or killed with minimal consequences. Life expectancy for Russian serfs rarely exceeded 35 years as malnutrition, disease, and exhaustion claimed lives. Families lived in overcrowded wooden huts without proper heating during brutal Russian winters. Serfs worked their landlords' fields 6 days weekly, leaving minimal time for their own survival. Serfdom was abolished in 1861 by Tsar Alexander II, though emancipation came with severe limitations. Former serfs received inadequate land and crushing redemption payments. The legacy left Russia socially and economically backward. Comment below if you think this system was worse than actual slavery. Number 4. The Early Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution began in Britain during the late 18th century and spread across Europe and America, promising prosperity through new manufacturing technologies. Instead, it initially created horrific working conditions that turned factories into death traps. Employers prioritized profit over worker welfare completely. The transformation inflicted tremendous suffering on working-class populations. Child labor became widespread as factory owners preferred small, nimble workers who could be paid minimal wages. Children as young as 5 years old worked 12 to 16-hour days in textile mills and coal mines. They operated dangerous machinery that frequently caused injuries, amputations, and deaths without compensation. Many children develop permanent deformities from repetitive motions during their crucial growth years. Factory conditions were nightmarish, with inadequate ventilation and sanitation causing widespread illness. Workers breathed toxic fumes and cotton dust that caused chronic respiratory diseases. Machinery lacked safety guards, resulting in crushed limbs and fatal accidents occurring daily. Average life expectancy in industrial cities dropped below 30 years as disease ravaged populations. Reform movements eventually forced governments to implement basic labor protections. The Factory Acts in Britain, beginning in 1833, gradually restricted child labor. Make sure you're subscribed because we're just getting started. Number 5, the Spanish Inquisition. The Inquisition began in the 12th century when the Catholic Church established tribunals to combat heresy. But the Spanish Inquisition, established in 1478 under Ferdinand and Isabella, became the most notorious branch. Pope Gregory IX formalized the medieval Inquisition in 1231, giving inquisitors sweeping powers to investigate and punish religious dissent. What followed was centuries of terror justified by faith. Inquisitors used torture systematically to extract confessions, employing devices specifically designed to inflict maximum pain. The rack stretched bodies until joints dislocated. The strappado suspended victims by their wrists tied behind their backs. The accused were often tortured until they confessed to predetermined charges regardless of actual guilt. Those convicted faced public burnings at ceremonies called autos da fe, elaborate spectacles that served as warnings to others. The Spanish Inquisition alone tried over 150,000 people for various religious offenses over 3 centuries. Thousands were executed, with estimates ranging from 3,000 to 5,000 deaths. The psychological terror affected millions more who lived in constant fear. The Spanish Inquisition was finally abolished in 1834. The institution demonstrated how religious faith could be twisted to justify systematic cruelty. Drop a like if you're learning something new about these dark periods most history classes skip. Number 6, The Atlantic Slave Trade. The Atlantic slave trade began in the early 16th century when European powers started forcibly transporting enslaved Africans to the Americas in what became the largest forced migration in human history. Portuguese traders initiated the system, followed by Spanish, British, French, and Dutch merchants. African captives were seized through raids, wars, and purchases. Over 4 centuries, this system would claim more than 20 million lives. The Middle Passage, the voyage across the Atlantic, subjected enslaved people to unimaginable horrors. Captives were chained in ship holds with barely enough room to move, lying in their own waste for weeks or months. Disease spread rapidly, with dysentery, smallpox, and other illnesses killing many before reaching the Americas. Ship captains routinely threw sick or dying captives overboard. An estimated 12 to 15 million Africans were transported across the Atlantic. Approximately 1.8 to 2 million died during the Middle Passage alone. The total death toll, including those killed in African wars fueled by the trade, likely exceeds 20 million people. Enslaved people in the Americas faced lifelong bondage under systems designed to extract maximum labor through terror. Families were deliberately separated at auction blocks. The economic wealth generated built Western prosperity while devastating African societies. Share this video, and let's make sure these stories are never forgotten. Number 7, the Dark Ages. The period following the fall of the Western Roman Empire in 476 CE plunged Europe into centuries of instability, now called the Dark Ages. The collapse of centralized Roman authority left a power vacuum. Trade networks that had connected the Mediterranean world for centuries disintegrated. Cities shrank dramatically as populations fled or died. Literacy rates plummeted as the infrastructure supporting education and culture vanished. Warfare became constant and brutal as Germanic tribes, Vikings, and other groups fought over former Roman territories. The invading forces showed little mercy, with entire populations enslaved or killed during raids. Agricultural production declined significantly as farming knowledge was lost, and Roman irrigation systems fell into disrepair. Famine became regular, with poor harvests leading to mass starvation. Disease spread rapidly through malnourished populations living in unsanitary conditions. Life expectancy dropped to around 30 years and infant mortality reached appalling levels, with half of all children dying before age 5. The feudal system emerged as local strongmen offered protection in exchange for labor, binding peasants to the land. The Dark Ages lasted roughly 5 centuries before gradual recovery began in the late 10th century. Comment below which period you think was humanity's absolute lowest point. Number 8. The Taiping Rebellion erupted in southern China in 1850, led by Hong Xiuquan, a failed civil servant who claimed to be the younger brother of Jesus Christ. Hong gathered followers by promising land redistribution, gender equality, and an end to Qing dynasty corruption. His movement quickly grew into a massive peasant uprising. By 1853, Taiping forces had captured Nanjing, establishing it as their capital. The Taiping forces implemented radical social reforms in territories they controlled, banning opium, footbending, and arranged marriages. However, their military campaigns were brutal, with cities besieged for months and populations massacred when they fell. The Qing government, supported by Western powers, fought back with equal ferocity, leading to widespread devastation across southern and central China. Entire regions were depopulated through combat, disease, and famine caused by the systematic destruction of farmland. The Yangtze River Valley, once China's most prosperous region, was left in ruins. Survivors faced years of starvation as agricultural production collapsed and trade networks disintegrated. Casualty estimates range from 20 to 30 million deaths, though some historians place the figure even higher. The rebellion's defeat in 1864 left China severely weakened, unable to modernize or resist foreign influence. Hit that subscribe button because we're exploring even more devastating periods. Number 9. The Black Death. Between 1347 and 1353, the Black Death swept across Europe, Asia, and North Africa, becoming one of the most catastrophic pandemics in human history. The plague arrived in Europe through trade ships from the east, carried by fleas living on black rats. Within months, the disease had spread from Italian port cities to every corner of the continent. At its peak, the Black Death was killing thousands every single day. The symptoms were horrifying and swift. Victims developed painful swellings called buboes in their lymph nodes, accompanied by high fever, chills, and violent vomiting. Black patches appeared on the skin as blood vessels burst beneath the surface. Most people died within 3 to 7 days of showing symptoms, and there was no known cure. The death toll was staggering beyond comprehension. An estimated 75 to 200 million people died worldwide, with Europe losing between 1/3 and 1/2 of its entire population. Entire villages were wiped out completely, leaving ghost towns scattered across the landscape. So many people died that bodies piled in the streets. The Black Death transformed European society in profound ways. The Catholic Church lost significant authority as people questioned why prayers failed. Labor shortages gave surviving peasants unprecedented bargaining power. If you think pandemics are only a modern concern, drop a like and share this video. Number 10. The Bronze Age Collapse. The Bronze Age collapse occurred around 1200 to 1150 BCE, when multiple advanced civilizations across the eastern Mediterranean and Near East suddenly disintegrated. The Hittite Empire, Mycenaean Greece, the Kassite dynasty of Babylon, and numerous city-states fell within roughly 50 years. Archaeological evidence shows widespread destruction at major sites, with many cities burned and abandoned permanently. Invading groups known as the Sea Peoples attacked coastal cities and disrupted vital trade routes throughout the region. Prolonged droughts and crop failures weakened societies already strained by warfare and economic pressures. The interconnected trade networks that sustained Bronze Age prosperity became fatal vulnerabilities when disruptions cascaded across regions. Entire cities like Ugarit were destroyed so completely that survivors left desperate pleas for help that went unanswered. Population levels declined catastrophically, possibly by 75% in some regions as people died or fled. Specialized knowledge of metalwork, writing, and administration was lost for generations. The collapse initiated a dark age lasting roughly 3 centuries before Mediterranean civilizations recovered. Iron gradually replaced bronze as tin trade routes remained broken for decades. New powers eventually emerged from the ruins, but the Bronze Age world was gone forever. Subscribe for more deep dives into history's greatest mysteries. Number 11. European colonization. European colonization of the Americas, Africa, Asia, and Oceania accelerated during the 15th century with Portuguese and Spanish expeditions. Christopher Columbus's 1492 arrival in the Caribbean opened the Americas to European conquest and exploitation. European powers claimed vast territories using religious doctrines that declared non-Christian lands available for taking. The following centuries brought systematic devastation on an unprecedented global scale. European diseases proved catastrophic for indigenous populations lacking immunity to smallpox, typhus, and influenza. In the Americas, approximately 90% of native populations died within the first century of contact. The Aztec and Inca empires collapsed as epidemics killed millions before military conquest finished them. Similar devastation struck Pacific Islands and Australia. Violent conquest accompanied biological catastrophe as colonizers seized land and resources through military force. The Spanish encomienda system enslaved indigenous Americans in mines and plantations under horrific conditions. Belgian Congo operations under King Leopold II killed an estimated 10 million Congolese through forced labor and brutality. Colonial legacy persists in ongoing inequality, political instability, and cultural trauma affecting formerly colonized nations worldwide. Colonial borders ignored ethnic and cultural boundaries, creating conflicts that continue today. The extracted wealth built European prosperity while leaving colonized regions impoverished. Make sure you like this video if you're still watching. Number 12. The Great Irish Famine. The Great Irish Famine began in September 1845 when potato blight caused by Phytophthora infestans destroyed Ireland's primary crop. Potatoes had become the sole food source for Ireland's poor, with entire families consuming nothing else for sustenance. The blight turned healthy plants into rotting black masses within days of infection. The disease returned annually, destroying harvests repeatedly and creating a prolonged crisis. British government response proved grossly inadequate and driven by rigid laissez-faire economic ideology. Officials refused to interfere with market forces even as mass starvation spread across Ireland. Ireland continued exporting food to Britain throughout the famine under armed guard while populations died. Relief programs like public works deliberately paid starvation wages. Approximately 1 million Irish people died from starvation and disease between 1845 and 1852. Typhus, dysentery, and cholera ravaged weakened populations living in desperate, overcrowded conditions. Another 1 to 2 million emigrated on coffin ships where disease killed many during passage. Entire villages emptied as populations either perished or fled. The famine transformed Irish society and politics in ways that continue resonating into the present. Ireland's population exceeded 8 million before the famine, but never recovered to those levels. The catastrophe fueled Irish nationalism and deep resentment toward British rule for generations. Comment below your thoughts on this tragic period.